Now, this particular issue, which should engage anybody's mind in any part of the world, but particularly so in a country like India, where a requirement of investment into infrastructure is huge. I mean, it's mammoth. I don't see any other country which has such a massive requirement of investment into infrastructure like India. It will be several $1 trillion in the next few years' time. And therefore, if we are going to make investments, that's a capital expenditure obviously, we must find out the best optimum way of making use of that investment. Secondly, a transporter like railways, which has an annual top line of something like $35 billion or in that region, which is likely to increase by another 50% in the next few years, so we'll cross 50 billion in the next few years. It's not a small revenue stream that you are talking about. So therefore, proper systemic analysis about the expenditure incurred and the revenue earned is a very important step from a public accountability perspective. But also if you look at it, a country like India, and that's why I said it is valid anywhere in the world, but also particularly for India, is because we have this several $1 trillion of money is not available domestically. This has to be invested. And most of this investment will have to come from, whether it is in any sector of infrastructure, whether it's railways or any other, one has to put that investment using domestic saving as well as overseas savings, some internal accruals, some budgetary support and some loans, all of that together are not available aplenty. So in view of the fact that there are scarce resources need to be deployed in something which is so necessary, then it is imperative that we must find out an optimum way of finding out that the resources are used in a most diligent manner. And secondly, if you are running an organization as large as railways, we need to have a proper information system, because decision making has to be an informed decision making. You cannot make decisions on the basis of your gut feeling. You must have a proper information base to decide what are the options and how do you want to exercise that option, which will give you the best results in a given situation. Situation will differ, and that's why the information system. In one given situation, you will take one decision, but probably you will take exactly the other decision pertaining to that, but in a different situation. So, information is the critical part of decision making, and that information also must flow to the railways. Then we need to decide the pricing of services of the railways, because railways are basically a service-oriented organization. It earns revenues from two main streams, which is passenger as well as freight. Both are services rendered by the railways to the people, because railways does not buy commodities on their own and they transport and they trade. They don't do that. So it's a service organization. So if you are going to decide the pricing of a service as to how much you should charge for a freight to the cargo handlers or as a passenger service, it must be based on certain costing analysis. You must know exactly what costs have gone into it, and then only you could decide how the services should be priced. You can always do that, as I said. There are other ways that you can do it in a very haphazard manner. You can have some system, but you must have a very sound and very mistake-proof system, and therefore we really need to have that. Another angle to it, maybe fourth or the fifth, whatever is the number, is we need to also bring in a management accounting concept into the bookkeeping concept. Normally, traditionally, when this accounting system must have been evolved in the country, what was the challenge at that time? That when the railway started 150 years ago, that whether what you received, how you spent, I must know that. So it's essentially a bookkeeping job. And a bookkeeping job is also an accounting job. If you want, and there is my colleague from Institute of Chartered Accountants of India is here, will tell you, bookkeeping is also an accounting job. Yes. But whether we should confine ourselves only to bookkeeping when we are talking about accounting, or we should go beyond it. And then the challenge is, if you want to go beyond it, should we just create a different silos, somebody looking at accounting or bookkeeping, somebody is looking at costing, somebody looking at management accounting, somebody looking at decision making based on this, then management information system. This is something beyond management accounting, because management accounting you could still do, but if you don't generate enough MIS out of it, how do you work on it? So an organization like railways, as I said, by sheer magnitude and the complexities involved, must have a very sound system-oriented approach toward this whole process. And therefore, in my budget speech, I had mentioned that we want to introduce an accounting system which will be going beyond a normal functions of bookkeeping. And that's why I had mentioned. And what I had mentioned there was that we want to bring in an accounting which will start with budgeting. Or let us look at it, let us forget that part. Let us go the step further. What is the purpose, which I just now mentioned all of this? What is the purpose of this? Is outcome mapping of what we are doing. If you are going to do outcome mapping, then obviously you must go back and find out where the end product is outcome. Where did you start to go to that stage of getting outcomes? So obviously the step before that was output, because without output you cannot get outcomes. Outcome is more abstract than output. Outputs are far more measurable in terms of concrete terms. Outcomes are a little more abstract in terms, therefore difficult to manage, but still necessary, because if you can just go output oriented and no outcome. So one good example is, we want to now spend $100 billion, say $10 billion into educating all. What is the purpose? We must create education to all. That's an outcome. So what are the processes involved? There are many processes. So we could construct, maybe spend all the $10 billion in 1 year, construct all rooms, classrooms, everything. End of the day, when you go and measure, everybody is there, but nobody can read and write. So what is the purpose of that? That's the outcome has failed, money has been spent. So the auditors are happy, because that's how we do the auditing. That expenditure has been spent, so that is very good. So we have become an expenditure-oriented outcome. That you spend the money, that's a good thing. What you get out of it is not very important. So if you do not have, so first, the last stage will be outcome, then come output. Then how can you get outcome unless you spend the money? So third stage will be spending money. But how could I spend the money in any democracy, or for that matter any organization, unless you are budgeted for it? So normally the process should start with budgeting if you want to get outcomes. And therefore budgeting, expenditure, output and outcome is the logical chain in which you must try to capture and track the government expenditure. And what is the purpose? The purpose, as I just mentioned, all of these 5-6 elements that I mentioned should be able to capture in that process. So what should be the accounting system? Accounting system should be robust enough, dynamic enough to capture all this in one system itself. And that's why I requested my friends from Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, but I think we should try to complete a job as quickly as possible. Now, what was the accounting change we talked about? We have talked about it for a long time. We are good in doing that. So we said, we'll do this accounting reform meant what? We said we'll convert ourselves from single entry to double entry. Very good. But that's something so basic that I don't think we can ever call it a reform. If we had not done it, only because the government accounting system itself was not mandating it to do it, it's not a great change. The second element we talked about was making from cash to accrual system. Again, I don't think it is something so radical, so dramatic that is going to bring in a change. Even today, the advisor accounts will tell you that even today it is possible without having in the present cash accounting system, that you can know exactly what are the accruals, because that may not be included into the accounting system as such, but they are available on a standalone basis. We can know exactly what is freight due as of 31st March when we close the accounts. Not necessarily it has been accounted for in the books as a receivable, but it may not have been accounted for receivable, but still we know the number. So what is the great change that we could bring about? So unless we do this both, obviously because there is so fundamental, but also try to change the accounting system the way we mentioned. And therefore accounting for accountability is the right way. Therefore this was my budget announcement, and I'm glad now we are progressing on that. We have set up a group for this. As I said, we must, first of all, how do you go about it? So I think let us first think about the designing of a system. rather than getting into too much of details of getting into final product, which division will implement, what zone will do it first. If you don't have a designing of a system properly, we'll not be able to implement it properly. So I think let us think about in a short time that our institute and all others are working, and that's what Mr. Mohapatra and his team should do, is prepare a designing of a system. Once the design is ready, then we can go into the detailing of it as to how to implement it. In any case, Government of India has a accounting system, railways are part of them, therefore we'll have to also take into account so many other stakeholders. But the idea would be that if we can have, if at all you are making a change, rather than making incremental change, why not make a substantive change in terms of bringing a completely different approach towards accounting? And that's what I discussed with you. I'm very glad that you have brought together some global experts, so I welcome you to India. I know this is a very interesting subject. I know that if you do not have system in place, then obviously you'll have to bring in another element, an organization which will be able to handle this system better. So that if you bring in the line managers who have got the ability to use this system and take decisions on that. So that's why, in fact, we have started making that change, bringing delegation, so that at operating level, people should be able to exercise power. So I think that must happen parallelly. One should not put one against the other rather than putting everything together. And therefore, while the system will be in place, probably people would have used and get accustomed to the new powers that have been entrusted to them. Some will make mistakes, some will do a better job. We can learn from mistake also. A mistake is also a good learning step. So we can understand, and then we need to codify that. See, the codification of the entire management apparatus is something which also should go hand in hand with the changes that we need to bring in together. So I think this is a good beginning. Mr. Mohapatra, how much time will it take to complete it now? Within the next few weeks?
So within a fortnight, so ICA should be ready. They have made the street.
I know, but you must change that. What you are thinking about is a very limited way. Not single entry, double entry and cash to accrual. That is something I think we should completely change our, because otherwise, if you limit yourself only to that, and that's not something, significantly are going to alter. As I explained to you, we already know exactly how much is accrual. We can find out. Can you not tell me today if you want to know, even today? In between, you can tell me how much is the receivable, how much is the payable. So this is not something significant. And therefore, to single to double entry, this also making single to double entry, at best you can prepare the balance sheet. To prepare balance sheet, you must know the assets. Where are they lying, physical value of asset, how you must reconcile them to the financial cost that has been incurred in the balance sheet. So it's not something, it's useful thing, but not something great. And this is why we really need to bring in a completely transformative approach towards accounting as a means of changing the way we do business in railways. It is not something which is, it's a tool. It's not a standalone exercise. And therefore, I think we really need to work on many of these areas. I know as an accountant myself that every debit must have corresponding credit. But I think, we must give due credit to where it is due. And also, therefore, I am saying we must congratulate you for being part of this process. I think we'll request you to be with us for a longer duration, not today, but over a period of time, as we said. I think what we can do is that it may not be possible or not necessary also to physically bring all of you. I know your time is so precious. What we could do is that have some sort of a weekly or fortnightly press video conference, so that we can bring in this group together. So we can, if you don't have objection, we can share with you our progress, and then we can move on with this. But I think the whole, as we said, the accounting system should be outcome oriented. Our effort also should be outcome oriented. So I think we should know when by when we'll really get this system of accounting in place, so that we can move forward with that. I think in any case, if this designing is very critical, because the designing itself is not right, the details of that will not be giving us the type of result that we expect from this. So I once again congratulate you, thank you, as well as all the members of the team. We have already created a small group which is already functioning, right? So I think we need to bring in more people and try to complete this task sooner. In the morning, I was not knowing that this program is on, so sorry for something. That's what I was telling one of my colleagues, that accountability of knowing that program is on was not there. It's like I had a cabinet meeting anyway, but I was still yesterday evening I was not doing, so I couldn't come. But I just said I'll still drop in. I need to leave at about 1:15. I should have been there at 1:15 some other place. But thank you very much. And I assure you one thing, that this is not just an academic exercise. This is something will be taken to the logical conclusion. It will be taken to fruition, will really result into something change. And I will tell you something. What you are doing is a part of a global thinking change that will bring about. And if you can succeed in railways, an organization as large as railways, as multifunctional as railways, you could use this in many other areas of governance. And this is the one great step of improving governance. I think we don't realize the importance of it, that when we talk about governance, is again a very abstract term. What is meant by governance? If you bring this type of change, the information is available, you can imagine the amount of significant change, the transparency that will be brought into the entire system. So I think we really need to keep transparency, governance as well in mind when we think about issues like this. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.